The Great Steppe, millenniums of events, hundreds of nomadic tribes and people. They lived, worked, made discoveries, conquered large tracts of lands, and left us some mysteries. To learn more about it, watch the project called Enigma of the Great Steppe. Coming up today, Orenburg, caught in the crossfire. Kizlyurda, strength test. Almaty, prosperous land. The poetic collection Asau Tulpar, which Sakien Sefulin dedicated to his young fellow citizens, was published in 1922 in Orenburg. This exact city, which is now part of the Russian Federation, was at that time the capital of the Kyrgyz Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic. How did Russian Orenburg become the main city of Kazakhstan? Why did the capital quickly move to Kizlyurda? Who and why did they insist on the transfer of the capital to Almaty? What does the Latvian Bolshevik have to do with the name Grandpa of Apples? And why do some believe that the 4 A letters in the name Alma-Ata carry a karmic meaning? To find the answers to these questions, we need to return to the past. In the centuries-old history of Kazakhstan, there were many political centers that at one time or another became the country's capitals. Transfer of the capital is a ruling elite's demonstration that a new period is coming, that it abandons the previous stage of historical development, that the country, the state, the nation, symbol of which is the capital, begins a new stage. Historians and archaeologists have not agreed on the number of capitals Kazakhstan had, 9 or 7. In different periods, such ancient cities as Sozak, Saganak, and Turkestan became the country centers. In the 20th century, such cities as Orenburg, Semipalatinsk, which was for a while called Alash Kala, Kizlyurda, Almaty, and of course Astana were the capitals of Kazakhstan. Some, speaking of the choice of Orenburg as a capital, say that nomads did not have permanent settlements, so they had to place the capital in the Russian city. Such statements cause experts sarcasm. In 1953, a well-known historian of architecture and Kazakh history scholar, Alkay Margulan, published a book, Architecture of Ancient Kazakhstan, in which he spoke about 12 cities of Irtysh. There is evidence of Arab historians who mentioned 32 cities in the territory of Kazakhstan. Then cities were mentioned in the Middle Ages, especially in the times of the Kazakh Khanate. For example, such medieval highly developed cities as Sozak, Saganak, Sauran, Talkhiz, and Turkestan had repeatedly caused strife between Kazakh and Uzbek rulers. On the territory of ancient Taraz, archaeologists discovered a white pipe created in the 10th to the 12th centuries. We cannot deny that these facts clearly demonstrate the level of development of the steppe civilization. Therefore, there were cities. However, the question is, where did these cultural and political centers disappear? Amir Timur caused a big damage to the traditional Kazakh Eastern-type cities. He especially harmed the Volga region cities, including Sarachik, which was the capital of the Golden Horde. He simply razed it to the ground, the reason being his resentment against Toktamish Khan for not fulfilling his promise. Then was the Jungar invasion. They also cleared their road to Tashkent by fire and sword. Jungars did not need cities and settlements but needed pastures. Therefore, by the 18th century, we observed total decline of urban culture. The fact that with the development of navigation, the value of the Great Silk Road fell sharply also greatly influenced almost complete disappearance of large urban settlements. But let us not go so far and talk about the history of the first Soviet capital of Kazakhstan. As is known, in 1730, the Khan of the youngest Kazakh Jews, Abu Khair, addressed the Empress Anna Ioannovna with a request to become her citizen.
Здесь мы не можем не коснуться вопроса особенностей российского.
We should definitely highlight the specifics of Russian colonialism because Russia, entering Kazakhstan and accepting Kazakh sovereigns to its own citizenship, pursued its own colonial goals. But these goals were of a somewhat different nature than traditional English or French colonialism, because it was not a direct takeover but a gradual absorption. It was colonization of neighbors. Those days, the territory of Orenburg was called Wild Field. There were no Russian settlements and no routes of large expeditions. In some sources, there's an indication that Abul Khair Khan promised the Empress Anna Ioannovna to protect the integrity of the lands, to guard the borders from attacks, and to facilitate the merchants, if in exchange she builds a fortress that would serve as a shelter in case of danger. An expedition under the leadership of Ivan Kirillov was sent to Trans-Ural in order to strengthen the imperial influence in the region. The expedition was instructed to build a city at the confluence of the rivers, Or and Yaik. Thanks to Vladimir Dal, Orenburg is called thrice conceived and once born, since the place for laying the cornerstone of the city changed along with the change of expedition heads. The final version was approved only in 1739. Construction began in 1743. In its almost 2 centuries' existence, the fortress on the River Or gained a fairly vivid history, which is reflected in the city archives. This is especially emphasized by the scientist, employee of the famous Issyk Reserve Museum, Galia Fayzulina. One should not limit the city as a capital by the framework of existing orders. Orenburg lands were the traditional lands of nomadic Kazakhs, and Orenburg city was the center. Our Kazakh museums began with Orenburg. More on that later. It should be reminded that it was in Orenburg when in 1833 Alexander Pushkin collected material for the captain's daughter. He traveled from St. Petersburg for almost a month. Here is how the great poet described his arrival. I came here with a beard and mustache, dusted and tired, and hungry like a dog. Governor's advisor Vladimir Dal, the author of the fundamental Russian language dictionary, became his guide and friend. Few people know that it took Dal over 50 years to write these 4 volumes. 8 of those years were spent working in Orenburg. Yebrai Altinsarin published his articles and reviews on the pages of the Orenburgsky Listok newspaper. The newspaper Dala Ualayatinin Gazeti, with notes on literature, art, and socio-political life of Kyrgyz Kaysaks, was also published in Orenburg. There was a seminary that taught Kazakh teachers. Authorities believed that educated Russified Kazakhs would help strengthen the imperial positions in the region. However, history had other plans. Russia had a political crisis, February and October revolutions that led to the establishment of a new political order. Therefore, modernization of Kazakh people went on a very accelerated pace. Mustafa Shokai wrote in his memoirs of 1917, Orenburg is the capital of the Orenburg Cossacks. There are only few Kazakh families here. Nevertheless, for quite a long time, Orenburg served as a real center of the Kazakh national movement. August 26, 1920, the decree on the formation of the Kyrgyz Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic as part of the Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic was adopted. The question about the capital arose.
То, что первая столица Казахской автономной республики.
The first capital of the Kazakh Autonomous Republic was the city, which had long relations with the Kazakh steppe.
Долголетние отношения с казахской степью. Город, в котором уже
the city in which a large stratum of Kazakh intelligence had appeared.
Довольно большой слой интеллигенции казахской, да? Город, в котором
the city in which there were educational institutions.
Заведения, поэтому это естественно, что потому что другого города сопоставить.
Therefore, it is natural that there was no other city in Kazakh steppes comparable to Orenburg's administrative infrastructure.
В степях не было.
In addition, scientist Almaz or Dabayev believes that it was very convenient for Moscow. That is the reason why the same year the city was withdrawn from the Russian Federation and became part of the Kyrgyz autonomy. Many Kazakh politicians of that time were happy with that. Orenburg was a native city for the Alash intellectuals because the Alash autonomy was proclaimed here. The newspaper Kazakh was published here, and Ahmet Baytursinov lived here. I must say that not everyone was pleased with this. Bolsheviks were among the adversaries, as according to them it was traditionally the land of the Cossacks, the Orenburg, the Siberian Cossacks. However, among Kazakh party elite representatives of those years, there were also a lot of those who categorically objected to such a decision. The capital of Kazakhstan should be on the territory of the Kazakh steppe, even if the Kazakhs do not have a city, but in no case in Russia. Kazakh people do not need a beautiful city with tall houses. They need at least a small, but their own capital. It will be difficult to do anything for the benefit of Kazakh people from Orenburg. Sultanbek Kozhanov and his ideological supporters have done a tremendous job in order to move the capital to Kizlochda. However, during 5 years, while the center was Orenburg, events that seriously affected the territorial integrity of the republic took place. In 1920, a member of the Central Executive Committee of the Kazakh Autonomous Socialist Soviet Republic, Alimkhan Yermekov, was sent to Moscow. The poet Sultan Mahmud Toraygirov described him in his poem, Young Yermekov, as a grasp and is as penetrating as a fast-moving and sharp-sighted falcon. Despite the fact that he was only 29 at that time, Alimkhan was a pragmatist, possessed the gift of persuasion, understood legal issues, and knew the history of ethnos and economic geography. He was also firmly convinced of the need for national sovereignty. A gray-haired Aksakal old man also arrived in the Soviet capital together with Alimkhan. At a meeting chaired by Vladimir Lenin, Yermekov made a report on the situation in Kazakhstan. Interestingly, Ilyich listened attentively to the eloquent speech of the Bolshevik Kazakh. They say he had a long conversation with Alimkhan and his companion alone. It is unknown what they were talking about and whether this conversation was tête-à-tête. But soon after, the leader of the revolution signed documents according to which a number of territories that for a long time belonged to Russia returned to Kazakhstan. The territories included Korostelyovskaya steppe, Semipalatinsk, Akmola regions, and the northern coast of the Caspian Sea. They were practically engaged in the collection of national lands. As a result of the activities of the Kazakh political elite, especially the Alash Federation, which would later be destroyed by Goloshokin, they gathered the national territory that was part of the Kazakh Khanate in its heyday under the rule of Kasim Khan. They actually restored the whole territory, especially the northern regions. Many historians note that Bolsheviks were not altruists at all, and they did not come out to meet their colleagues out of nobility. They were not bothered by Kazakh people's fate. Here, of course, there was a political calculation connected with the fact that it was 19s and 20s, the Civil War had just ended and the social base of Soviet power was very weak, especially in the national outskirts. Bolsheviks had no one to lean on, and their only support was the national elite, who volunteered for cooperation. German writer Leon Feuchtwanger once said, "History is like nature, has its own laws." Not so much time will pass before Bolsheviks from the center dramatically change their policies. The best representatives of the Kazakh intellectual will be accused of nationalism, pan-Turkism, and other isms. The color of the nation, not only of the Kazakh, will be destroyed systematically and methodically. Some will be sentenced to be executed, others will completely perish in the camps. Only a few will be rehabilitated without a terrible mark, posthumously. Soon there will appear a man whose name still evokes in Kazakh people, if not hatred, then disgust. The name of that person is Shaya Itskovich Goloshokin, but he preferred to be called Filip Isayevich, who came and said Soviet power exists for 10 years, but in Kazakhstan there is not even a hint of Soviet power. Aristocrats are still in the power. Auls, village, are still ruled by Bey, rich aristocracy, of Chingiz origin, because Ali Khan Buykekhanov was Chingizized by origin. However, the time of terror has not come yet, and autonomy is gaining momentum. In 1924, Joseph Stalin, a political alien to sentimentality, was appointed People's Commissar of Nationalities. He literally draws the boundaries of the republics with one stroke of a pen, guided, as experts say, by the divide and conquer principle. April 1925, the Kazakh Autonomous Socialist Soviet Republic appears on the map. In addition to northern, central Kazakhstan and western, we also receive the territory of southern Kazakhstan, which is part of Turkestan. These are such territories as Semirechye, Sirdarya, and Karakalpakia. At the same time, a decision is made to restore the very name Kazakh. This is when the national Kazakh leaders finally reach their dream. Naturally, with the acquisition of a new status, a new capital is also needed. April 17, 1925, a historic decision was made to rename the truly Kazakh city of Akhmechet to Kizlorda and make it a political center of the Kazakh Autonomous Socialist Soviet Republic.
На тот момент это был город, в котором была железная дорога.
At that time, the city had railway, while all other large settlements of Kazakhstan did not have it. For Moscow, it was not possible to manage the torn-off region not connected by railway. Another outpost, another capital appeared, and it was Kizlorda. Another very important factor for the adoption of this decision was the fact that most of the Kazakh people resided in the Akhmechet. The city itself, although not that large, before the construction of the railway there were just over 8,000 people, and almost a century of history. The ruler of the Kokand Khanate, Omar Khan, founded the city. However, the ruler robbed and oppressed the local population for so long that they were forced to turn to the northern neighbor. In 1853, the Russian troops burst into the fortress under the command of General Vasily Perovsky, in honor of whom the city was soon renamed into Fort Perovsky. After the revolution, its previous name was returned. In connection with the transfer of the capital, it was given the name appropriate to the time and became the Red Horde, or Red Headquarters. All the forces were thrown at its arrangement. Significant funds were allocated. A special technical commission headed by Abdulai Sergazin was appointed. The new chief architect of the city was appointed. St. Petersburg architect Alexander Budasi. Muhammadjan Tinishpayev was summoned from Turkestan. Authorities tried to turn Kizlorda into a cultural and political center of a young republic. Historian Saltanat Asanova cites as an example the memoirs of Assistant Secretary of Kazakh Regional Committee, Mikhail Ryadin. City improvements immediately began. Apartment houses and administrative buildings, telephone, telegraph communication, and transport appeared. The public bodies did not have enough space in Kizlorda, but there was no other way out. Kazakh patriots were afraid of neither 45 degrees below Celsius cold nor 45 degrees above Celsius. Domestic disputes also did not scare them. New schools were opened. A brick factory was launched. However, very soon it became clear that it would be unlikely to create a real capital there. First, there was no lighting in the city. Therefore, a decision is made to establish kerosene lanterns. Kerosene becomes a deficit product number one there. Also, there was a housing issue in the city. 49 institutions and somewhere around 1,050 people of the state apparatus were to be deployed. Despite the accelerated construction, officials simply had nowhere to live in the provincial town. 2 public baths were confiscated into the apartments for employees. That did not save the housing situation but complicated the problem of hygiene. There was dust everywhere. There was nothing to pave the streets or water them. The only water pumping station simply could not cope.
Когда уже приехали
When managers from Moscow arrived because it was impossible to solve the problems without Moscow's control, they saw the whole charm of this stuffy, hot, extremely uncomfortable city, and began to think that it would be better to live somewhere more decent. Nevertheless, the history of Kizlyarda is one of the brightest pages in the chronicle of Kazakhstan, especially in a cultural sense. It was here, at the initiative of prominent political figure Nigmet Nurmakov, construction of a drama theater began. He personally supervised the progress of the work until its opening on January 13, 1926. It was the first national theater in the history of Kazakhstan. The premier performances were the tragedy in Lik Jibek of Mukhtar Awezov and Altin Sakina of the playwright Khosh Muhammad Kimyengerov. The artists of the first Kazakh theater were such leading figures of Kazakh culture and music art as Kulyash and Kanabek Baysitov, Kauken Jandarbekov, Zhumat Shanin, and many other outstanding figures of Kazakh culture. Newspapers and magazines are actively published in the Kazakh language. A powerful base for the creation of a national pedagogical university is being formed. Kazakh Pedagogical College is being opened. Also, Kizlyarda citizens are proud of this historical museum of local lore. Kizlyarda Museum was most involved in the creation of the Presidential Center of Culture. Many items from the Kizlyarda Museum were transferred to Astana. However, party functionaries could not stand the test of the harsh climate. Thus, on March 2, 1927, at the All-Kazakhstan Congress of Soviets, a resolution was passed to move the capital from Kizlyarda to Almaty. The history does not say from whose submission it happened. In spite of the fact that Almaty was simply a paradise in comparison to Kizlyarda, such a choice of the capital still surprises specialists. After all, the city is almost on the border of the Republic. It was an extremely inconvenient place to accommodate a capital. There was very little housing, there were very few large buildings. Plus, let us not forget the unfortunate past of the city, which was twice destroyed by an earthquake. Probably the presence of the railway and more or less decent climate were the reasons of transferring the capital. Officials took into account the previous experience and did not hurry with the move. According to archival documents, in fact, Alma-Ata became the capital in 1929. However, the name came out with a problem. From time immemorial, nomads called the place Almaty, and did not mean the father of apples. The name Alma-Ata is a joke. It is something to laugh about. The name is absolutely illiterate. Moreover, I read somewhere that it is probable that Almaty citizens did not come up with it. Indeed, the name of the city Alma-Ata was proposed by the Latvian communist Alfred Lepa back in 1921. However, Kazakh politicians supported his idea. The order was signed by the chairman of the Regional City Committee, Uraz Jandosov. Why? Perhaps it was a kind of courtesy towards the Soviet authorities, or there were other reasons. There is no equivocal answer to this question yet. People inclined to believe in mysticism argued that the four letters A in the name of the city reliably protected them from adversity, including destructive earthquakes. Well, this version also has the right to exist. However, this linguistic incident did not prevent Almaty to remain one of the most beautiful, majestic, and quiet cities of the Soviet Union for many years. Best scientists of the Republic worked here. The most stunning performances were staged. Works that entered the Golden Fund of National Culture were also created here. In 1993, by the decree of the President of the Republic, the city was returned to its historical name, Almaty. At the same time, the question arose about choosing a new center of the country. In 1997, Astana, then Akhmola, formerly Zelenograd, became the capital of the Republic. A year later, Astana was presented to the international community as the capital of independent Kazakhstan. Now it is a modern and stylish metropolis. However, we must remember that the history of this city also has a century and is still waiting for its researchers.